Coming up on Kentucky Outlook, taking sustainability beyond recycling and reuse to realizing the ramifications of our actions. Are we creating an unlivable planet? We're going to take a closer look at sustainability and also a proposed pipeline through the United States. What will it mean for climate change? Stay tuned. Kentucky Outlook is next. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Kentucky Outlook. I'm Barbara Deeb. We're glad you joined us. Well, our guest on today's program believes we are at a critical juncture in the well-being and sustainability of our planet. In his book, The Pipeline and the Paradigm, Sam Avery believes, and I'm quoting here, this is the tipping point. He joins us in the studio to fill in the blanks and to share his story after traveling the proposed route of the Keystone XL pipeline. We're going to find out more about that. Also joining us is the Sustainability, it's a tough one to say, Sustainability Programs Development Coordinator for WKU, Nancy Givens joins us. And you want us to take a look at recycling and reducing, but really look more at the ramifications of what we're doing. So before we go any further, when we say the word sustainability, and welcome to both of you, thanks for being here. When we say sustainability, what are we talking about? What does that mean?
Well, it's we're reaching a point on the Earth now when we are having to worry about some things we never had to worry about before. Years ago, we didn't have to think about sustaining the forests or sustaining the oceans or the atmosphere. They all took care of themselves. So we really didn't have to have this as part of our understanding of what we're doing here on the Earth. But now, as we're reaching some limits, suddenly we have to take a different view of ourselves and what we're doing here. And part of that is the whole concept of what is the carrying capacity of the Earth? Not how much can we keep consuming all the time, but how much can we use and still live compatibly with the natural world.
So basically we're going to hit that wall, or we're going to hit that edge where, unless we pay attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I would interject that we are in fact hitting that edge in many ways, many places. I'll give an example. When I was when I was young, and also when I was in my 20s, I traveled to the Caribbean and to Puerto Rico and did a lot of scuba diving and snorkeling. Had beautiful coral reefs, and I was down there just about 2 years ago, and in some of the same places the coral reefs are entirely bleached out. There's very little fish life, there's very little coral life. So that's just a minor example of some of the consequences that we're already seeing. So we're already...
But you know, you bring to mind, I wonder if more people took just a moment to think about a situation like that and really paid attention, they could probably point to something in their lives, in their everyday lives, where they can see a change, where they can see that momentum changing. Mm-hmm. Agreed?
Absolutely. And we can see it in some changes in the seasons, but we see it in the larger sense through media. We see things happening in the world that don't fit into our worldview. And that's what I got into in my book in particular. The term paradigm means a worldview. It's just a fancy word that means just an understanding of what we're doing here. And it just seems that there are things happening now that are in the world but are not in the worldview. Things like a melting ice cap. There's only half of the Arctic ice cap left.
Only half?
Only half. And we have more intensive storms now. We have heat waves. We're having fires in the West. And these are things we didn't have to think about before.
I can remember in this very studio, many years ago, several scientists talking about climate change and how the greenhouse effect was not real. It wasn't real. It was something made up. And as the years go by and as we see the progression, it is a very real thing.
The very recently released fourth assessment by the International Panel on Climate Change, which is an international body of scientists, represents thousands of scientists from 130 countries, and they basically have been studying the science for climate change and have put together the charts and everything. And when people actually go to the data and see the charts, it's unequivocal, the rapidity with which this is changing. Of course, climate change has happened throughout geological time, no question about it, but the big difference is how rapidly it's happening. Now, when it happens over hundreds of thousands of years, then there's much more time for adaptation. But when it happens within decades, species don't have the ability to adapt. And of course, we know that in history there were major mass extinctions, and it's appearing that we're setting up for a mass extinction on the planet again. The difference being,
the difference being, because that sounds a bit alarmist.
It is alarmist, and I think I have come to understand myself as something of an alarmist. I'm not here to scare people because that draws attention to things, but the alarm is going off. Not everybody's hearing it, but yes, we do have to wake up. We don't have as much time as we might previously have thought, because the sooner we react, the better chance we have of correcting some of these imbalances.
And some of these imbalances are correctable?
Over time, yes. Now, we are going to see more climate change, regardless of what we do. Even if we were to stop emitting carbon dioxide tomorrow morning,
which
there's
totally not possible.
No, it's not going to happen.
Totally not possible, but boy, it sounds good.
But if that were to happen,
in a perfect world,
there's a time lag in the time when the carbon dioxide first comes into the atmosphere and when it shows up as heating and climate change. It's about a 30-year time lag. So the little bit of climate change we've begun to see now, that's not a result of the carbon dioxide that we put in recently. That's the result of what was put into the atmosphere 30 or 40 years ago. What we have done and what we're continuing to do now will not show up for another 30 or 40 years into the future. So it's going to get worse no matter what we do. The question is, how bad is it going to get? And I think if we're able to make adaptations quickly, and that depends on our ability to see what's going on.
Or to admit that there's, you can see it, but then you're going to do something about it.
Exactly.
Which brings me to my next question. Sustainability. You gave us a nice working definition of what that means. Paradigm, nice working definition. But in general, in the people that you deal with, do you think people are getting it? You say the alarm's sounding, we're not hearing it. Some people are hearing it. Now, how do we get the masses to hear?
Well, that's exactly what fascinates me. And this is why I've written this book. Because in talking about the paradigm is a worldview that is based on unquestioned assumptions. And the prevailing paradigm in our society right now is what I call the economic paradigm, which is based on the assumption that we are here for the purpose of promoting economic growth. Now, that's an unquestioned assumption. Most people would not say that because it's already assumed. It's already in the worldview. So that when new information comes in, if your worldview is already formed and it's in concrete, new information comes in and you don't put it anywhere. You have nowhere to place
it. Or it bumps into that concrete wall and goes bye-bye.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why we have denial. That's why what you were speaking about earlier, that a lot of people cannot process this new information because it doesn't fit into their concept of what we're doing here. And the new paradigm that's beginning to arise now is a much bigger picture that includes the oceans, it includes the forests, it includes the land, it includes the weather, and it puts human activity into this much larger context. It doesn't deny the economy. We'll always need jobs. We'll always need economic activity. We'll always need money. But it puts the economy inside of the ecology. It puts it into a much bigger picture that we can all see and then we can live with. And then if we're able to make this paradigm shift to a larger worldview, then we'll begin to understand what's happening, and we'll have a better chance of reacting to it.
Is it one at a time? Is it this one person at a time you make this shift? Because, a paradigm shift, I visualize a big movement. Is that what we're talking about, or can one person at a time really make a difference?
I would like to address that question a little bit. I think a lot of people have in their mind, and what I often see is that it is that the way we're going to make this shift is, so I change my light bulbs to CFLs, I start recycling at my household and that kind of thing, composting, and those are very, very important steps, obviously. But the thing that we're not seeing is policy change. There's been, both in the media and in the government, the denialism has really superseded in this country, any concerted, large-scale efforts to really make a dent in this problem. That's not necessarily true of some international countries where we see a lot more movement. And
which was my next question, because we can't do this alone. We're not on this planet alone.
Right.
We can function in this space around us, but it's the world view that you're talking about. So you're saying there are other countries that are making a difference.
Yes, many countries. There are countries, my area is specifically education for sustainability, trying to get education into the school systems, into the university systems, into education in other capacities.
Yeah.
And in this country, there's been very little progress. There are other countries that mandate it from K all the way through the university level. It's
now, what
mandated.
are some of those countries in particular?
Australia is one, Switzerland, Wales. And in this country, finally, Washington State has passed an environmental education and sustainability literacy that's mandated for all grade levels. So just as we have Common Core standards throughout education, expectations of what you're going to learn at each grade level, integrated within each grade level, the expectations also relate to environmental education and sustainability. It's very specified what people are supposed to understand at each grade level. So it's a wonderful accomplishment that I hope we can
Well, that's a
replicate.
whole different show, right? We need to talk about what they should learn at every level. But I think, as you pointed out in the beginning of the program here, is just an awareness, a general awareness of where we stand in this place, in this worldview. And
let me give another example of type of policy change. Sam is a solar installer. In this country, well, in this state, we do have net metering laws, which means that if people install solar energy, then they can feed it back onto the electrical grid, which saves them from having to invest in storage capacity. The electric grid basically serves as the storage capacity, so that cuts the cost of a system. That's a very progressive move. That's very good. But there are many countries that have mandated what they call feed-in tariffs, which is a system where they pay extra for the solar energy generated to encourage the investment in renewable energy, which eventually produces energy for no cost. And it shifts people over to the renewable energy. So it's an upfront investment and long-term cost savings. That type of policy we've tried to pass in Kentucky. We haven't gotten there, but that type of policy can really move solar energy investments.
she says we haven't gotten there yet. We're going to talk more about that. And speaking of the state of Kentucky, a proposed pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, to deal with tar sands. We're going to learn more about that when Kentucky Outlook continues. We're going to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be right back. Kentucky Outlook continues. I'm your host, Barbara Deeb. On the program today, we're talking about sustainability. Now, really, what does that mean to you? Well, our guest on today's program believes we may well be at the tipping point at a very critical juncture when it comes to the well-being and sustainability of our planet. Welcome back with me, if you will, Sam Avery, who authored the book, The Pipeline and the Paradigm. In addition, Nancy Givens joins us. She's with WKU Sustainability Development Coordinator. She is the development coordinator. But at the first half of the show, we got a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about sustainability, how we need to take a closer look at our worldview. We need to look beyond what is before us and see the ramifications of our action. You know, there was a campaign, oh gosh, now it's been probably 20, 25 years ago, reuse, recycle, you know, and got people paying attention. But it seems like it's that once a year on a certain day when we all pay attention, we all do what we're supposed to do. But what you're saying is, needs to be a part of our lives. It's got to be a part of our behavior.
Right.
How can we do that?
Well, I think these things are very important. It's extremely important to recycle, to switch light bulbs, to try to walk more, drive less, have a garden, or go to the farmer's market. These things are all very, very important. But we should understand that they are symbolic. They stand for something much bigger than themselves. So the important thing is to develop and build a vision of a renewable energy future. It's going to happen. If any future happens, it's going to be a renewable energy future. So now is the time to build that vision, which is the worldview, which is the paradigm, and live it in our everyday lives symbolically. Because it's not here yet, we can't live it in its entirety, so we have to live it in small symbolic ways that will become bigger and more important over time. We shouldn't be satisfied with just recycling and changing light bulbs. We should understand that those are part of something that's much bigger, that is coming and that we're encouraging to come. Because that is the future that we'll move into. It's the only future that we have.
Now, you're a solar installer, but you wrote this book because you saw a need to write this book, and the book is called The Pipeline and the Paradigm, and in particular you're referring to a specific pipeline.
Yes, in this case I'm speaking about the Keystone XL pipeline, which will go from Alberta, Canada to Texas. It originates in the tar sands region of Canada. Now, the pipeline itself is just a hollow tube that's 36 inches in diameter and 1/2 inch thick. It's totally innocuous by itself. The problem is what's going through the tube. It comes from a region of Canada which is the second largest fossil fuel deposit on the planet, next to Saudi Arabia. Canada has more fossil fuel than Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Dubai, Nigeria, Venezuela, and the United States. It's the second largest fuel provider. This is an undeveloped resource as yet. It's an extremely crude form of crude oil. It has enormous environmental difficulties on its own. But the worst thing as far as the climate is concerned is that there is enough carbon in this deposit to bring the Earth's climate up to a threshold point where we could very easily tip into an irreversible tailspin that would make life on Earth questionable for plants, animals, and people.
Now that's a huge statement. How is it that you just took an interest in this and started researching it and to find out more about it?
I didn't go into anything that is not available to anyone else as far as
it's there
the
if you want to find out
yes,
more. Yeah.
right. It's an enormous deposit and people don't know about it. But this is where we are beginning to get our fuel from, is from Canada. And this, people say, well, that's great because it's energy independence.
And they're our friends.
Right.
Yes.
It's a reliable source. It's a friendly neighbor. So from the purely economic point of view, from the economic paradigm, this pipeline is great. But if you put it into the larger picture, you could see that it threatens our very existence as a form of life. So we could succeed economically while failing biologically.
Talk to me then and help us understand, and Nancy, chime in here as well. You said a lot of people, have heard about Canada. I have heard about the Keystone Pipeline. Do I really understand it? No. I've also heard about something called the Bluegrass Pipeline. Do I understand it? Logan County, our neighboring county, might be involved. So what we're talking about is, with this pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline, we would take this crude oil from Alberta, is it the Alberta, Canada area? And we need to get it from point A, we need to get it to Texas.
Right.
Well, guess what? Got to get there somehow.
Got to go through the Great Plains of the United States. And the reason to get it to Texas is, well, refineries.
Sure.
That's one reason. But the other reason is that this is a deep water port in Texas where this stuff can be loaded on super tankers and sent anywhere in the world. So it's not immediately for our domestic use. It's to put on the world market. So this stuff can be piped by the billions of barrels and consumed all over the world.
Now, who's doing this? Is it Keystone?
Well, it's the company's called TransCanada that's building the pipeline. But the oil companies are from all over the world. United States, Canada, China, everywhere in the world. Every major oil company in the world is investing in tar sands development in Canada because it's so huge.
Well, and I'm grinning because due to technological reasons we could not show the pictures, but if you get a chance to see what a tar sands looks like, you mentioned in a photograph it's alarming, but in person you say it's even more so.
Well, if anybody has been to eastern Kentucky and seen mountaintop removal sites, you'll know, if you've actually seen them, you'll know that a picture cannot really do justice to what's happening. It is absolute destruction of the surface of the earth. This is going on a much larger scale in Alberta, Canada, for the tar sands. They're being strip mined. There are other forms of extraction as well. But if you Google Earth, Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, you can see these. They're visible from space. Enormous square mile after square mile of former boreal forest has been absolutely stripped and destroyed in order to get the tar sand underneath. And native peoples in that area, of course, are horrified by what is happening to their environment.
So with these tar sands, then, help us understand, because that could take another 2-hour program to really fully understand it, but we will be taking from this, help me understand the process. So
well,
once it gets to, or gets through.
When it's mined, it's actually in solid form. That's why it's called tar sand. It's actually a gooey black stuff that cannot move in a pipeline by itself.
Okay.
So it has to be upgraded. Other chemicals are added to it. Some of them are known carcinogens. And we don't know exactly what they are because the companies won't tell us what they are.
Okay.
But this stuff has to be liquefied in order to move through the pipeline. And many people along the route of the pipeline in Nebraska and South Dakota and Texas and so forth, people there are very concerned about this pipeline leaking along the way, because it can get into the groundwater, it can destroy cropland. They don't know if their water is going to be pure anymore. There's no real way to know whether they're drinking this stuff or not. And it's,
I think a huge concern in the Midwest is that the pipeline route goes through the Ogallala Aquifer, which is a very large water supplier in that part of the country. It supplies water for, I've read, as much as 50 million people.
50 million.
And the pipeline route goes right through the Ogallala Aquifer. So when you think about water contamination, it's horrifying to think about, because obviously in those parts of the country, water is extremely valuable.
I'm grinning because I saw a headline the other day, "Water, the new terrorism." And that doesn't have to be from an outside source. It could be from someone within our own country just trying to. So now, how does the Bluegrass Pipeline fit into this scenario?
Okay, the Bluegrass Pipeline is actually something else, but it's part of the same larger picture. The larger picture is now we're in a huge rush to grab the remaining fossil fuels on the earth. And we're finding quite a bit of it out there, actually. And the Bluegrass Pipeline is a liquefied, it's actual natural gas liquids that are a byproduct of fracking, of hydraulic fracturing in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And these liquids, formerly we got our natural gas from Texas and Louisiana. It was piped up this way.
Okay.
The Bluegrass Pipeline is going to be a new pipeline which will connect with an old pipeline and send these natural gas liquids back down to Louisiana and Texas, again to a deep water port, largely for export. but it will go right through central Kentucky. And many landowners here in Kentucky are extremely upset by the fact that this pipeline will do Kentucky no good, whatever. It just goes through us. We can't put anything in
Unless you're
it.
the person whose land it's on and you're getting paid, or you're
Yes.
the company that's getting. We're quickly running out of time, and this is a very complicated subject, but I was hoping, and you've done a good job of that, of just enlightening us on what we're talking about when we hear these things. And what I would ask of you now is to leave our audience with what is it that you're watching this show, you've just heard this, what can we do? What small part can we play in this bigger worldview, in this bigger picture?
Well, in my sense, I don't think it's a small part. I think everybody has to play a big part. I think very important is for people to educate themselves to these issues, because what we're hearing through the media, it doesn't tell the whole story. And it's such a critical turning point, and it is a worldview change. The very good news is that we have so many alternatives that we can shift to, but we're not making the shift, is the thing. And we keep hearing that we're very late on the clock. They put the time at 5 minutes to midnight, very close, and we're not making the shift. We're still talking. And a lot of people think that, well, it's kind of a counterbalance. If we make the shift, we're destroying the economy. But the thing is, those businesses that have made the shift, that make sustainability really a core focus of their business, are very successful businesses. Communities that have made that shift are very, you think of Vancouver, you think of Seattle or Portland, that have
So
really.
it is making a difference.
It's making a difference, and it becomes the driver of the economy.
The driver of the economy. Nancy Givens has joined us. She is with WKU's Sustainability Development Center. She's the coordinator there. Sam Avery, your book is available online?
Yes, it is.
It's called The Pipeline and the Paradigm. I hope you two will come back and share more.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We've
you.
run out of
It's been
time.
very enjoyable.
That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Kentucky Outlook. We've been talking about sustainability and what you can do. You can do your part. Until next time, thanks for joining us.